New all-time high. Are you excited, or do you feel like somebody slapped that horse and there's no catching it now? I'm not sure if that's an analogy that people use, but maybe they should. It's too late to buy gold and silver. The price got away from us. That's what I'm seeing in the comments. We missed our chance. Well, it's a popular sentiment lately, and it's also one that stands out to me personally because I guess I felt that way in 2011. And if you zoomed in on those few years, well, kind of turned out to be right. Not that it's ever truly too late to buy, but I really was too late on that particular rally. And that feeling hits even harder today with gold breaking past $35.90 on Friday. So look, let's be clear. There are a lot of reasons this time around is different than 2011 at the point where I thought that I was too late. I'm really just saying that I can relate to the feeling, and it's pervasive enough that I think it's worth covering because at $35.90, gold is definitely expensive. Silver above 40, same thing. The rate of change is going to make that feel relatively expensive too. Now, I'm going to get into affordability and how much I think it makes sense to have, but first I want to point out that the too late to buy comment, well, that feels like something that grew out of the I'm holding out for the pullback sentiment, and that might have stung a few people. Quick shout out to channel sponsors Summit Metals. If you're looking for gold and silver, be sure to check them out. They help make this content possible, so I really appreciate them, but they're also just a really good place to buy from. SummitMetals.com. So this pullback prediction, that was probably even more prevalent than the it's too late to buy comment. It started as waiting for gold to fall back to the 1600s or some specific number, 1750, 1776. And I don't mean to rub this in, but those calls for a pullback, or I guess the pullback, they've been coming in heavy since November of 2023 when the price of gold was about $2,000. So rather than just giving in, calling it a game, hitting the showers, let's look at affordability because all of this is relative to inflation and affordability. The average person can't afford an ounce of gold. That's a comment I see a lot too. Now, we don't care about average so much as we care about our own situations, but average affordability does get into how much gold or silver would be reasonable to stack. How do you do that? Well, a few ways. Bald Guy Money actually ran some calculations on how much gold or silver he thinks a person could afford, and his videos are definitely worth your time if you're not already watching them. But I'm just going to keep this simple. What I'm going to do here is grab reported figures for DPI, that's disposable personal income. The average American brings in $66,100 per year after taxes. That's according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis as of July 2025. And the percentage that people save in a year is 4.4% of that. So that works out to $2,908 if you do the math that the average person can afford to save in a year. Now, an ounce of gold costs $3,590, so you see where this is going. Now, I've talked about the benefits of having 3 ounces of gold, and I've talked about buying 1/4 ounce per month. That would have meant saving around $450 a month when I first mentioned it in 2020, but the cost of that same amount of gold today has jumped to around $900. So that would be nearly $11,000 annually, well beyond that $2,908 that we just said the average person in the U.S. can afford to save in a year. Now, going back to the beginning of 2020 when gold price was $1,520, the disposable personal income, DPI, was $42,000 per year, and the personal savings percentage was about 7.9% at that point compared to 4.4%, so the average American could save $3,319. A little bit of math again, they would have been able to afford 2.2 ounces of gold if that spot price stayed steady. Now, we know it didn't. It ran all the way to $2,072 by August of 2020, but a person still could have saved right around 2 ounces of gold in a year just 5 years ago. Compare that to 0.85 ounces today. And that's what I mean by average affordability. It's a significant change. So where we're going with all of this is not only is gold rallying, personal savings aren't even coming close to keeping up. The average American could have stacked 2 ounces in 2020, 0.85 of an ounce in 2025. So these comments about affordability that have been popping up, they're accurate, at least for the average person. But the comment on whether it's too late to buy, whether it's time to get out and just admit defeat or continue to wait for gold to fall back to the 1600s, that's an idea that's been proven wrong for 23 months and counting. None of us can predict where prices go in the future, but the past data makes it really clear it wasn't too late to buy in November 2023, and waiting has meant missing out on two of gold's best years. So the real question here isn't whether it's too late to buy. I don't think it's a yes or no type of question. I think it's more about how much. How much still makes sense to buy now? And not so much what's affordable for the average person, but what's affordable to you. What amount still gives you some options to stay ahead of inflation or get away from saving exclusively in the dollar, whatever your goal is. So I still think that idea of 3 ounces of gold as a base makes a lot of sense. That's worth more than $10,000 today. Actually closer to 11. So it's both a significant emergency fund and a harder target to get to. And if you think of gold as more than an emergency savings, maybe you think of it as a way to protect or subsidize retirement, well, that's more like 17 ounces on average, as I pointed out in my last video. So that's an amount that's an even harder goal to get to if you're just starting out now. And if you're a silver guy, well, that 17 ounces of gold, it's actually 17.6, would be more like 1,540 ounces of silver. Don't worry, I won't touch the silver on screen without my special gloves. Okay, so far we've talked about how much the average person could save in a year and what that means in ounces today. So 0.85 ounces of gold or 72 ounces of silver. Now, ideally, we started accumulating before today and we have some saved up that helps us get to our targets faster. But regardless of what you paid along the way, those targets for how much you might need are still relevant. And we're just going to stick with these numbers. 3 ounces of gold today is worth nearly $11,000. Now, that's not quite 3 months of average expenses, but I see it as subsidizing 3 months, if nothing else. Now, 17 ounces, that number is closer to $61,200. That was about 10% of 17 years of retirement needs, so ages 65 to 84. Now, looking forward, 2 likely things happen. The value of gold that you have climbs higher, and then, of course, the cost to accumulate it does as well. So it gets harder to hit our targets. Now, that also means that over time, we could either need less or we could expect what we have to go further. So I'm not saying here, let's all slow down. I'm saying even with today's high prices, getting out of the game probably isn't the right move. That's not financial advice. It's just saying that accumulating might only be getting harder. That's why I've been talking about quarter ounce coins being a better choice lately. It's just getting expensive. Now, let's consider some price targets here. My personal opinion is that gold running to $4,000 over the next year is a pretty conservative estimate. Silver running to 50, that probably is too. So that puts 3 ounces of gold at $12,000. 17 ounces would be worth $68,000. So does that price gain mean that you need less than 3 ounces for an emergency, 17 ounces to protect retirement? Well, probably not, but it does mean that hitting stacking targets will probably take more time for most people on average. What I haven't really gotten into in this one is how much I think a person should actually have. So let's fix that. 3 ounces is a base case use, in my opinion. I've used that a lot. I'm going to stick with that and just say that that's what I think people should have. 17 ounces would be 10% toward average retirement needs. That was meant more as a hypothetical, but let's turn that into something with fewer variables. If the average person in the US brings in $66,100 per year after taxes, and they use 95.6% of that, that leaves $63,192 in annual expense. I know it's a lot of numbers, but it just means 17.6 ounces of gold, which sounds a lot like our hypothetical retirement case of needing 17 ounces. Now, being a person who likes round numbers, let's just add the two together. 3 and 17, that's 20 ounces of gold or 1,800 ounces of silver. Now, do you need that much? No, need is subjective. Everybody's case is different. But if you had 20 ounces of gold, that would be $72,000 today. Now think back to the beginning of 2020, 20 ounces of gold would have been worth $30,400. Such a good example of what can happen. Now think about that in terms of value over time. Conservative estimates would put 20 ounces of gold worth $80,000 or more a year from today. Now, none of this, of course, is guaranteed, but the idea here is that you don't think of gold as an expense, you think about it as wealth. So with that angle in mind, the idea of it being too expensive, you missing the boat, or just thinking that you need to give up until it drops to $1,700, which is less than half of gold's current spot price by now, none of that makes sense. Now you can say it's too expensive based on what you're able to save, but the solution there is just to buy less or less frequently. So here's a fun thought. When gold hits $4,000, which might not be too far away, every quarter ounce coin will be worth $1,000. Look, I can do math. Now, I can't tell you how many comments that I've seen from somebody saying they only have 3/4 of an ounce or they only have 1.5 ounces. 3/4 of an ounce will soon be worth $3,000. 1.5 ounces, $6,000. Probably all heard about this 2025 bank rate survey that found 59% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency expense just using their savings or cash on hand. Only 41% could. We're very, very close to being able to say that owning 1/4 ounce of gold puts you ahead of 59% of Americans. And let's call it good there. This was meant to answer the question of how much you need and whether it's too late to get there. So how much you need. I gave the case for 3 ounces again, 17 or 20 as a goal. More if you live an expensive lifestyle. But remember, 1/4 ounce of gold still puts you ahead of 59% of Americans, or at least it will soon. So let us know where you stand on all this. How much is enough? Is price blocking you? Do you prefer silver over gold? Have to sneak that one in. And where do we go from here? Let us know in the comments. And then while you're there, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.